All right, let's continue with our discussion of liberty. I want to equate it to this word deliberation. You see the root of liberty in here, which is possible. It could come from the Latin libra, which means scale. So to deliberate means to weigh. Or it could come from liberalis, right, which means free. So either way, really, it explains where we want to go. But I'm going to take this possibility. So you all know, right, that to deliberate means to think about, right? So when we say we do something deliberately, that doesn't mean that we do something impulsively or accidentally. It means we thought about it, we weighed it, we had free choice in the matter. And there's a lot, if we unpack this term, as to what deliberation actually means. And what I would like to do is to bring up a model of the soul. All right, now here's the deal. I'm not getting all religious. This is a model of the soul from, it's expressed in Plato's Republic and a lot of Plato's works. And this was very common in the ancient period, this concept of the soul. But before we get religious-y, in Greek, soul is this word, psyche, which is rendered in various English spellings. And psyche, the word we get psychology from and all that, means sort of life force to the Greeks. And everything had a life force. Every living thing, right, life, to the Greeks then had some kind of soul. But the idea was there are different types of soul. And so at the very bottom of Plato's model is the appetitive soul. And this is a soul, a living thing that keeps itself alive. So really these are living drives. So this would be things like, you know, to eat, to hydrate. Seriously? There we go. Procreate, all that sort of stuff, right? So in other words, the very basic elements of life. In other words, all living things have at least a soul of this nature. So here you could think of, you know, like plants would be an example of this, right? Because plants indeed have appetites. That is, they have needs to eat, to hydrate, to procreate that are part of being a living thing. Then we have the emotional soul, or sometimes called spirit. And emotion or spirit is available to animals. And these are things with basically a central nervous system. Now, obviously, Plato didn't understand or explain it in that way, but that's the deal. Because the thing about animals is they have the ability to move. Well, so do plants, right? But we mean here locomotion. In other words, they can move themselves, which is why in Latin, animus, there's animus in the masculine, anima in the feminine, and anima, the word we get for animation and stuff, means to move. So animals are those things that can move. Okay. And then finally, we have at the very top, I should say this. So the main difference between these two is that these ones, all living things, have these needs that life meets. But the main difference between the animal and the plant is that the animal can choose to locomote itself, I guess we could say. That is, to move around in order to get the things it needs. So whereas in the summertime, you know, if there's a drought, the grass dies, the cows can walk around to find more grass. At the very top of the model here is the rational soul. And the rational soul is one that can think and deliberate. This is where we get our calculation, our abstraction, all that kind of stuff. And this is available to human beings. And here's the deal then. So if we look at this, right, we could say this is all living things, this is animals, and this is people here, right? Animals have both an emotional and an appetitive soul. People have a rational, emotional, and appetitive soul. In other words, as you move up the chain, you still have those from underneath. Now, let us clear the page. Let's go back to our tripartite soul here. Okay, now how does this apply to human beings? Well, so that means that the human being has three levels, right? There's the bodily, there's the emotional, and there's the rational. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, just like plants, we have bodily needs, right? So these would be our physical desires. And this would include things like obviously hunger and thirst, right? That kind of stuff. But it also includes the need for pleasure, the need for physical stuff. I meant to write thirst there. Because here's the deal, right? Basically, money is what gets us stuff, and the stuff gives us the pleasure in dealing with things like our hunger and our thirst. In other words, the human being, money is how we satiate our bodily needs, right? Like whether you're rich or poor, you need a house, right? That's a bodily need for human beings, a physical need. Whether you're rich or poor, you need food. If you're rich, you get really good food, right? So you get to go to the market street, right? Or you get to go, buy fresh organic produce. And if you don't have much money, you get the 99-cent menu at McDonald's, right? So money is always equated to the bodily when it comes to humans. Emotions, well, you know what we mean by that, right? By our emotions, we mean our impulses, feelings, all that kind of stuff, right? And this is where we can say there's a connection to animals. Because indeed, you can tell when your dog is happy, when your dog is scared, when your dog is angry, right? Same with human beings. In fact, if you look, you see the root word of motion in here, and this helps us, right? Because the emotions are those feelings which encourage us to move. Generally, to have our bodily needs met, right? So, for instance, self-preservation, anger would move us to, preserve our life or something, right? But then also you could think on a more complex level, perhaps sadness or depression. Depression or a feeling of, might be your soul telling you to make a change in your life, right? Who knows? But anyways, that's what emotions are. And then reason, obviously, the rational is, as we said, the deliberative part. Okay, now here's the deal. This is the soul of a plant, this is the soul of an animal, and this is the soul of a human being. I'm just going to go HB, okay? Human being. Now, the human being has all this in him or her, right? So the deal is we do have, obviously, our bodily desires and our need for pleasures and our physical desires. We also have our passions and emotions. But what makes us truly human is this part, the rational. So if you're, following this model and you believe the ancients, then the idea is that this is what is truly human. This is what is simply living. So we share this stuff in common with other living things, but this is our true nature. This is what makes us unique. So, can a plant act as an animal? It can't. Can an animal act as a plant? Well, I guess if an animal acted as a plant, it would have no feelings at all or something like that, right? Could an animal act as a human being? No. We like to attribute, human affections to our animals, but they can't think abstractly and they cannot deliberate. Can a human being act like an animal? Absolutely. So a human being, here's the deal. If we say, oh, I'm very emotional, right? Or I'm very passionate. Here's another word. Emotion and passion and feelings we share with animals. They are not human. They are not our nature. They are very powerful. They influence the way that we make choices, but they are not uniquely human. Likewise, our bodily and physical desires are not uniquely human. We share them with all living things. So if we live for fun and money, that's supposed to be a dollar sign, and pleasure, right? This is the life here of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Then we are living as plants, not as human beings. Likewise, if we live for passion and impulse and emotion, we're living as animals. It's only when we make deliberate choices that we act as human beings. Now back to this word liberty. If we're going to take deliberate to stem from the Latin word for liberty, that means that when we deliberate, we choose freely, right? Remember, it had to do with free. And so free thinking is when we do not have the influences, of this stuff. Because we know very well that our pleasures can move us to make decisions that we regret. We do know that our emotions can have us lead us to decisions that we regret. How many times when we are angry do we say things which later on we come back and say, oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't me? Because what we mean is, this is me. The weighing part, the thinking without emotion and without appetites, that's what is uniquely human. So human beings can choose not to act on their desires or not to act on their emotions. Animals can't. Animals, well, you can train animals, but then it's just one emotion conflicting with another. But animals are their emotions. They are their instincts and impulses. An animal cannot decide one day. A bear, for instance, can't say, well, I don't think I'm going to be a bear today. I'm not going to go to the river and catch salmon. I am going to go into the town, get a coffee, and think about going to med school. Only human beings can do that sort of thing because we have the power of deliberation. That is a free thinking. And free thought is the kind of thought that we have when we are acting on our nature, and our nature as human beings is rational. So therefore, to deliberate means to be able to think without the influence of appetites and emotions. And this is what makes a good judge. And judge in Greek, kritikos, is where we get the word for critical thinking. So, what is deliberation? Deliberation is the ability to put your emotions and appetites in your pocket. And when we do so, this is how we think abstractly. Now, how does this sort of jive with a republic? Because in a republic or in a democracy, we have to be able to vote based on reason, not on our emotions or on what we think we're going to get physically out of it. We have to be able to have the reason to think abstractly by the process of deliberation to do what is the best for the whole of the republic. And that's the idea of deliberation and how it applies to the ancient model of the soul.